All right. Season 2, episode 1, I guess.
1.5.
We're still at it. No, I'm excited. I'm excited about the new year. A lot of change for us, for my family. Going to graduate one from college, helping another through a gap year, and then figuring out what's next. So, you ready for this year?
Man, no. I heard a guy say, man, January is the clogged sinks of the months of the year, where it's like, I think I'm totally guilty of going through the holidays and kind of just pushing aside all the pressing realities in my life. Then all of a sudden, we're 2-3 weeks in, and it's like 2 weeks in, it's like, okay, yeah, it's all still there. Like, gonna have to handle this. So I'm hopeful that through that, we can adjust and lock some things in that can, create some breathing room, decompress. We're in the grind, man. We're in the hopper of life, and we've got the 4 kids, and we're in those crunch years. So we have just gotta try to make it just a healthier space to be in. That's the goal.
Yeah. No, I'm not one for New Year's resolutions, but in my world, January tends to be fairly slow paced in tech, in the part of tech I'm in. I know there's parts of tech where January is absolutely bonkers, but for me, January is a chance to set the stage for the year. So my job is, one, it's really my sweet spot because I work in a strategy role. So I'm thinking way ahead of everybody. And January is a time for me to kind of map out the year. So work is pretty light, and so I take the time to really kind of kickstart my fitness. I'm starting to work on my training. I haven't identified what I'm training for yet, but I still need to, I need to get the volume and intensity for bike races that I want to do.
Yeah. So there's some races coming up. Do you think that's what the trainings you're going to aim it for?
Yeah. So now's the time where I look at the calendar and look what my friends are doing and what events interest me that look like they're going to be fun. Like I'm past that time where I'm racing multiple times a month and it's my life. Now it's just like, I want to do fun events that look interesting and usually some travel involved. It keeps me accountable. So the community and the events that I'm looking forward to keep me accountable. I don't exercise. I hate exercising for the goal of just
looking
being
good.
Like, it's so uninteresting. I would give up so fast. I need a goal, and I need community, and that accountability comes with it. So I'm doing that. And then, one thing I'll probably start talking about a little bit more on the pod, given the response last year's, when I kind of talked through my battle with depression and what that looks like. Cause it's really important, especially when I talk with men. I always lean into that to make sure men are taking care of themselves mentally. So I'm starting with a new therapist in the coming weeks, going through the intake and kind of setting the stage for that. And so I'm excited to see how that works. Obviously, I'm going to try to be as safe as possible with that conversation, but my objective there is to encourage men to consider therapy, no matter how good or bad things are going. And so, I want to help make that okay. So that's kind of where I'm kicking my year off. And I may even start some yoga.
Nice.
I'm in that empty nest. I'm an empty nester. So I got the time, especially in the evenings. It's like I don't have kids' sports to go to most days. So I'm gonna get some yoga. Nice. as I get older, I'm just trying to fight that aging. 50's coming up on me. So man, that's January,
Sweet,
start the year off. No that's resolutions. Great. It's not my thing. I don't have any goals.
Well, it sounds like you got a good long game plan.
Yeah.
Shaping up, man. That's awesome. And I appreciate your perspective and your, desire to do what you just shared about mental health and men and depression. And that's awesome, man.
I know in Texas where you are, it's difficult because insurance doesn't cover much. Having been in Texas and did therapy, it's pretty much out of pocket. And there's a severe shortage in Texas. Oregon has some laws in place that require insurance to just be better.
Yeah.
So it's much more affordable.
Yeah, and maybe just being in Texas is a disadvantage about being a dude in Texas. That the stigma that comes with that contributes to all the things where you just got to man up and figure it out.
And I want to break that. That's
Yeah.
when I talk with men all the time about career and the people I'm mentoring. I try to be vulnerable and share my struggles, and hopefully that encourages people to just make it okay. Let's talk about it. So, yeah,
Awesome.
no, I'm excited. So I want to shift gears. Remember Jack Johnson, the
Yeah. Oh
musician?
yeah. Heck yeah. Brushfire Fairy Tales.
Right. Give me the take. Now, I was on the West Coast. I was in California
Mm-hmm.
and Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in California and Hawaii
Yep.
during Jack Johnson's peak.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a different perspective on it.
Okay.
But being in more Middle America,
Mm-hmm.
what was the perspective on the Jack Johnson?
My brother-in-law introduced me to him because he was in California at the time when he came back, and when he came back with this love for Jack Johnson.
Yeah.
And he's a Texas guy, came back, spent some time in California. And when he played it, it was easy listening. It was like this, as soon as you turned it on, it's like, it reminded me of just dudes hanging out around a little fire pit with an acoustic guitar by the ocean side. So like, he has that laid back, what I would assume is kind of just this surfer beach, guitar playing. Instead of Kumbaya around a bonfire, he's playing his little guitar by the beach.
Right.
And so, I mean, his songs are just super easy to listen to, family friendly, stuff you can play with the kids. The kids like it, especially when he did the Curious George album. Yeah, just that's my take on it. But G Love and Special Sauce made their rounds in Austin, and I actually was following them in high school and caught them at like La Zona Rosa and some of these small venues in Austin. And so they had a little bit of a funky kind of spin, bluesy spin.
Yep.
And I know that they collaborated together, so I feel like that added some flavor to what Jack Johnson was doing. So I would say I was a fan when it first came out. And then as he progressed, I appreciated him. I liked him, but I wasn't as into him throughout the years as I was when he first came around.
Yeah, no, that 94 album from G Love, what was that? Is it Philadelphonic?
Yeah, Rodeo Clowns is a cool song on that.
Or maybe it was just the self-titled album. That, it was just the self-titled album. That I first heard that in 97. It was one of those albums where I remember where I was when I first heard the song. My Baby's Got Sauce was kind of a big hit off there. And, it even has one straight up hip hop song on it with blues backing. He's got a guest rapper on there, and it has a hip hop edge to it. So it's almost, I never listened to blues music on purpose, but G Love was different. It was a little more. It wasn't, just annoying, blues riffing. It was actual songs that had flow and dynamics, and it was interesting. And the guitar work was enough to serve the song, but not in the way, like a lot of blues, the guitar or the saxophone, all that stuff is just in the way. We're here. It was like, we're making songs to listen to, sing along to. So bangers. But yeah, Jack Johnson. I often joke Jack Johnson is the default music to play at a dinner party for white people who aren't really music fans because of all the things you just said. It's safe. It doesn't offend anybody. I mean, not to take away from it. It's good music. Like, he's got some great songs. It's simple. It's not in your face. It's just that kind of music. And I bring up Jack Johnson because there was a movement, like most music you heard of. There's usually a local or some kind of regional movement of a sound where different people are making the sound and somebody makes it out of there, or a few bands make it out of there. I think we've talked about like the Red Hot Chili Peppers in that West Coast funk movement with Infectious Grooves and Suicidal Tendencies, and that sort of stuff. They made it out of there more than anybody. Jack Johnson is one of those. He really was on track to be a pro surfer, I believe. I might not be 100% right, but he was in the community of pro surfers like Rob Machado, Kelly Slater, the Weatherly Brothers, that whole Shane Dorian, those guys in the era of Josh Kemble and I talked about it, the Momentum videos, which were like the Bones Brigade videos for surfers in the early 90s.
Cool.
You know, big part of my life. And so these guys just were traveling, and just like you said, you described it, they were probably sitting on the beach or at someone's house there on the North Shore, and just guitars are laying around when the surf is down or in the evening, and they're just, you know, planking away on that stuff. And a few of those bands, a few of those guys made it. Most popular, obviously, is Jack Johnson. You may have heard of Donovan Frankenreiter. What's his name? The blue guy plays the slide. Ben
Harper.
Ben Harper is kind of, he was kind of almost
cut from that cloth.
He was almost the mentor to those guys. Like he was their guy who was actually, he was a full-time musician, and he hung out with these surfers. So there's just kind of this community. There was a band out of Santa Barbara that was similar to that. So there was little pockets of this. There was kind of the San Diego movement. You know, Rob Machado was based there. Then you kind of had the Hawaii thing where Kelly Slater, Shane Dorian, you know, where Frankenreiter were there. And then you had the Santa Barbara surf scene, which is a different surf scene. And there's a band that I was into. It was just a couple dudes on acoustic guitars with some other accompaniment, really in that vein, but much more on the topic that we're talking about today later, guitars, much more guitar centric. The guitar work is really good. And it's lost music, as we've talked about, music that we listened to in years past, but it's not available on the streaming services. So essentially, for better or worse, if you're an artist who had an album that you haven't got it onto the streaming platforms, you don't exist. You're kind of lost, you know. We talk about Panchico, and they were just kind of a band that wasn't around anymore. This is similar to that. So I don't think they're ever going to blow up, but the band is called Hughes and Wagner, and I first encountered them. They had some music in surf videos, just like I discovered a lot of music in surf videos and skate videos growing up. And it's similar, a lot of slack key guitar. Are you familiar with that? Where it's kind of that Hawaiian, it's that Hawaiian sound of on a regular 6-string guitar, where there's just
not quite ukulele.
Yeah, no, there's certain kind of arpeggios and scales that are used in slack key, and some of that sound is in there. So it's think Jack Johnson, but but if someone of like a James Taylor, a Jim Croce type of guitar work.
Okay.
And it's, I'll link it in the show notes. The album is called Lady of Cicero. It probably came out. I don't have the CD around me anymore. My CDs are just in storage. They had an album, Lady of Cicero, which is now on Spotify, linked up in the show notes. And they had an EP with like 5 songs on it. So those aren't there yet. And a couple of my favorite songs are on that EP. So I have them, and I have them, I have them digital in my library, so I can still listen to everything. But it's something I've been keeping an eye on, like every few months, because my wife doesn't have access to my cloud music that's ripped CDs, and she loves this stuff. It was really one of those albums and one of those bands that was really core to our life during our time when we lived in Hawaii. So it was the sound of Hawaii for us. So Hughes and Wagner, Lady of Cicero, really neat. So just think Jack Johnson, but better, which is probably why, better musicianship, or at least more. I don't want to say Jack Johnson's not a good musician. Don't get me wrong.
No, yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But it's kind of like the difference between, the Decemberists and Mumford and Sons. Like the Decemberists is a little more palette forward, a little more challenging to get into because they're more dynamic. And then the Mumford and Sons is the same stuff, but just easier for most people to palette. So Lady of Cicero, Hughes and Wagner, if you want some surfer music from the 90s. I think that first album might have come out in somewhere between like 92 and 95 or 96. Definitely not after that, because I'm pretty sure I was listening to it in that time frame. And just kind of a band that didn't make it, but their stuff's on Spotify. I'm excited. I'm listening to Hughes and Wagner. Love it.
Sweet. Good recommendation, man. That's
Give
great.
it a spin.
Heck yeah.
All right. So I had a couple, 5, I counted 5 different people had asked me. So I'm at this stage of life where I'm launching kids into adulthood. My son will turn 20 next week. He's my youngest, and my daughter will graduate college here this spring, summer. And so, and my daughter, without kind of, stealing her thunder, is kind of a public figure. And so I interact with a lot of people that interact with her. Same with my son. My son is not, although not a public figure, as your kids get older and they interact with adults more, you get feedback from adults. So you'll get to that place, you probably get feedback from like coaches is where it starts when if your kids are playing sports, like how your kid is doing and that sort of stuff. And I've gotten feedback / questions from some people who are just had a kid, or their wife is pregnant, or they're pregnant, and they're just like, hey, I think your kid or kids is cool, or they seem well-rounded. They, you must have done something right. Give me some tips, and so, and someone asked me that via one of the socials. And so I wasn't, I didn't feel like typing, something into the phone. I'm like, hey, you know what? I'll just answer this on the pod. Just grab the next episode, and this will be the next episode. And I'll kind of give the spiel that I've given to the 4 other people who had asked over this winter, and really just my basics on new parenting. And a little background on me: I minored in child development. My career started off in nonprofit space, working with teenagers, so middle school, high school, and so child development, some child psychology in there, and that's kind of the limit of my expertise. I'm not an expert. I don't do seminars on parenting, although I used to teach a seminar to youth workers and volunteers and professionals on the transition kids make, usually in the middle school time frame, as they start to develop a theory of mind and a sense of existential empathy, which is really important, which is why a lot of adults struggle to connect with kids in that time frame, and why the kids tend to get written off in that time frame, because their brain is experiencing such a dramatic change. So I used to teach it it was like an all-day seminar on that. For a few years I was doing that. So, but that's my background. So I have a little bit of credibility in this space, but the rest is just my anecdotal experience. So I don't want to, pretend like this is how it needs to be. But really, I look at life for kids. So here's my elevator pitch. I see if I can do this in under 5 minutes.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Sell me.
I look at raising kids in 3 phases. One is birth through 4 years old. The other one is 4 years old through about the time they develop that empathy. So they start to get a frontal lobe that's starting to function, and they can put themselves in other shoes. This is usually early teens. For some girls, it might be even earlier, because their brain matures faster. For some boys, it might be a little later, like freshman, sophomore year of high school. So
mine's still developing.
And then the third phase is what I call adult practice. And so you just need to know what the main objective is in each of those phases, because parents put way too much pressure on themselves in terms of what they do and how that affects the outcome for their kids. And the first one most get wrong is birth through 4 years old. And that is your main objective in that time frame is to make sure your kid is kind. And the measurables for that are, do kids around their age like them? Do they get along? And do adults like them? That's it. Like, you're not trying to, your kid, it's, teach my kid to read and all this sort of stuff. Like, cool, but that's not as important as your kid being socially grounded and being kind and being able to get along with people. And here's why. And why, parents, you don't matter as much as you think you do after 4 years old. After 4 years old, and I'll link some studies here in the show notes, after 4 years old, give or take, about 80% of your child's social development now happens outside the home, away from parents. So you only have about a 20% impact on your kids' social skills. And we can all agree that's the most important thing. Everything comes after that. Whatever your goals are for your kids' intelligence, whatever your goals are for your kids', athletics, whatever your goals or objectives or frameworks are, if you have religious paradigms that you're trying to shape into your kids' life, those all need to come after them getting along with everybody, right? And here's why. especially with adults. And this is where I think a lot of parents kind of trip up a little bit. If your kid annoys adults around them that aren't you, they're going to get bad energy from adults. Right? I've been around those kids where I'm like, hey, where the adult kind of lets them run wild. Boys will be boys, that kind of thing. Lets them run wild. And it's like, I have to give your kid negative energy just to protect my own sanity, right? It does take a village, but the village has to like your kid, right? So just kindness, and that part really came to being when my wife and I were like I can't remember what it was, some kind of class or something. Maybe it was prenatal, that thing where they're like, what do you want for your boy? And it was boy specific. I remember the question, and everybody goes around the room. I want my kid to be strong, and I want him to be masculine. I want him to be smart. And my wife's like, I just want my kid to be kind, and it's true. All that stuff can come after that. If you want your kid to be smart, you want your kid to be athletic, you want your kid to be masculine, feminine, whatever, that all comes after kindness. That's your goal. That's simple. Your kid needs to be liked by people, and you need to like your kid. If you can do that, everything is going to come after that. Yes, there's kind of the 5 paradigms of things that we'll talk about in phase 2. So that's phase 1, 0 to 4. You need a kind kid that people like. Phase 2 is the development of a sense of empathy, which happens somewhere in there, and in that time, you're also trying to figure out what your kid is kind of good at and learn how to kind of water that and let it grow. So if your kid tends to lean into arts, water that, let it grow. If your kid seems to like sports, lean into that and water it, let it grow. If your kid is into, reading, education, intelligent things, water that and let it grow. But in that, your objective is to get them to understand this power they're starting to develop, which is to be empathetic and to understand other people and understand how they might view them and how they think, so they can just be connected to their fellow humans on this earth. And if you can do that, the adjustment period, because there's going to come a point, you've had kids, John, that are, you probably remember one day, all of a sudden your kid now really cares about their appearance.
Yes.
Right now, all of a sudden they are showering every day. Yep. They are spending time in front of the mirror. They
picking out their own styles of clothes.
They are fighting with you about the clothes you're buying them. That's because what's happened in their brain is they've gone from, I kind of think about other people, to this shift to, not only can I think about other people when they're around me and how they might feel in the moment, when they're not around me, my mind can put myself in their shoes. And now I'm thinking, oh crap, they're thinking about me now too. So now I'm worried about what the kids might think about me when I show up at school. So that I start to care. So you're preparing for that, because that's a violent shift. And it is very challenging for a lot of kids, depending on the substrate. But if they have a good foundation of, you have a kid that people like, they're getting good energy, they have some things that they are passionate about or getting good at, and you're helping them with that, so they kind of have an anchor of identity. And then when they get into this space where, oh crap, people are thinking about me, even though they're probably not, they can handle that, because it's a violent shift. And if that's not going well, a lot of things start to fall apart. Grades collapse, behavior becomes a problem. They start to give up on things they used to like, or get into things that maybe might be harmful. So it's very important to get that right. So first phase, 0 to 4, kind kid. Second phase, adapted and ready for the mind fuck of everybody's thinking about me all the time, even though they're not. It's challenge. So that's the third one. And the last one is adult practice. Like, how, start to test what your kid could handle in terms of chores, in terms of taking care of themselves, making decisions, right? And that's really the big one. So yeah, you can, like, some families have a lot of structure, like these are your chores and those sorts of things. And that's all great. Whatever the framework you want to use, what matters is, can your kid think critically and make decisions that are good decisions? And so if they're liked and they understand people, that's the kind of the main framework for making good decisions. How does this affect me? How does this affect others? So and then I can start to think forward. So better to have them learn how to make the decision to do the things that need to be done, like homework or chores, than just establish a rigor around it, because now they're just being robotic about it. So, and all of that is wrapped in 2 things. One is kind of the 5 areas of responsibility you have as a parent. Most people would say, well, I food, shelter, clothing, everyone agrees there. Like, I need to keep my kid alive and protect it from the elements. And then everyone would say, well, I also owe them love. And right, that gets you most of the way there. The last one is trust. And I think this one is the first one to get thrown out by parents, especially as they move into teenage years. And if you've messed up early on, people don't like them. They're getting bad energy. You start to have a kid that's a more challenge as you move into phase 2, which is empathy. And then phase 3, adult practice, is just, off the rails if the first 2 are messed up. And so the trust becomes an issue. But trust your kid. So if they're making good decisions, it's easier to trust them. So if you've trained them or mentored them to make good decisions, then you're on your way. So it's really that simple. I need a kid who's kind. At 4 years old, do people like my kid? As they move into teenage years, do they have a healthy understanding of where they fit in society within their frame? Do they understand their empathy and are they able to wield it safely? And third phase, can they make decisions? Can they make critical decisions? Because at the end of the day, you're not going to be there. And the last thing I'll say is this: discipline. One of the last resorts in discipline. You can have all your structure you want. You have different paradigms, whether it's just whether it's religious based or just how you view the world, however you want to discipline your kid, all that, whatever. One of the last tools of discipline is prohibition, banning something, not allowing something. Better to, and one example is music, because that was core to me, and I have a lot of trauma from that. Did your mom throw away your tapes?
My youth pastor convinced me to take them around back and break them by the dumpster.
My mom barged into our room and threw away a stack of tapes at least twice that I can remember. Banning things. What that does is, the danger there, music is core to my being, right? Music is an important part of who I am. And now you're banning something that makes me who I am, that is a part of building Vince. And you've banned it. Now you've broken the trust, Mom. I now have to hide all sorts of things from you. And once I start hiding little things, am I going to start hiding big things from you? Right. And the reason for this is, look forward, and you're moving into these years where your kids have more freedom, autonomy, they're driving, transportation. Can they make the decisions? Mm-hmm. The decision you really want them to make, and this is what it all comes down to. If you've done all this right, when something goes horribly wrong for your kid, somebody gets pregnant, someone gets arrested for drunk driving, car accident, those sorts of things, whatever you want to think, who do you want them to call first? You want them to call you. Mm-hmm. Do they trust you? Do they know? Do they believe that no matter what it is, you will always start on their side, and you will always give them a hug? And that's what I want my kids to know as we move into adult practice: is no matter how bad it is, I need you to trust me, and I need to make sure I set a substrate so that you trust me, so that when everything goes sideways, you can call me because I'm on your team. As a father, it might be different for women. I can only speak from a dude's point of view. My son will likely will rarely encounter another man on this planet who wants him to do better than them at everything. Right? I want my son and my daughter to do everything better and have a better life than I did in every dynamic possible. And that's rare. And so I want them to know that. So that's kind of that's my parenting one. You're starting off, people have to like your kid.
Yeah.
Do what it takes to like your kids so they get good energy from the world. Everything else can come after that.
Man, that's really good. That's really good, man. There's so much there. My mind was racing all over the place. One of the first things when you're sharing is like, dude, you were there when 3 of my 4 kids were born. And like, I remember I've had pictures of you holding them, for the first time. And I remember one of the first Vince lessons I received it may have been our second, maybe Tyler. You came over and we had like childproof the house. We had like pads everywhere on the corners of things, and like little gates with switches, and cut a tennis ball and put them on the ends of the knobs. And you're like, what is all this? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not entering their world. They're entering your world. So like, take the pads off. Take the pads off. And like at the time, I didn't quite get it, And now I'm so much so the same way. Like when I go to other people's houses and I see all the money and all the effort and all the time to build their world in a padded, safe, clean environment, it triggers that response within me that I remember, with you. And then I also remember there were
That's
a lot
a good
of times.
one. I want to jump on that one real quick because that there's a paradigm to that I learned early on when we were living in Hawaii. We're just starting. I'm a year into my career after college, not making much money, but our wife and I are like, yeah, we think we want to have kids. And a mentor of mine was like, you're never going to be ready to have kids. If you want kids, have the kids. And what I learned very quickly is for the first really 4 years, your kids are not much of a burden financially. I think that's really overblown. Unless you are super dependent on a dual income and you're maximizing, you're basically spending all your money, where we weren't dependent on a dual income. My wife kind of worked part-time. I had a full-time career. Yeah. She was kind of working full-time, kind of working part-time, but it wasn't like, we're dependent on it. So a few years of her, she didn't really work until my youngest was in kindergarten, but it came down, you're never going to be ready. And the other component of that is, like you said, is they're entering your world. You're not shutting your life down and then crafting a world for your kids.
Yeah.
This is your life. This is who you are. Continue to be that.
Yeah.
Unless there's something grossly wrong, you have some addiction or something. Yes, cut that out of your life. Yeah. But if you like your life and you're a good person, invite your kid into your life, and that trickles down into everything. Like you said, the safety thing. I remember distinctly having a conversation with somebody who had a kid who was just like a few months younger than AJ at the time, and I think AJ was around a year and a half. And she's climbing on like a little wall that's maybe a foot off of some grass, right? And the other kid was starting to climb too. And as that parent got up, I can't remember if the husband or wife, I kind of stopped and I said, wait. I'm okay if AJ falls off of that.
Yeah.
Right? Like she's going to learn more falling a foot onto some grass than if I go there and rescue her before it even happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just part of it. Like your kids have to learn to navigate the world. And that goes forward to the other one. Like, and this is very controversial, what I'm going to say now. I've never used filters on our internet to block websites because eventually, and probably sooner than you are comfortable with, your kid is going to have access to the actual internet, right? And they're not going to know how to navigate it, right? So better to train your kid. Hey, Dad, I saw something I didn't think was right, and tell me about it, versus creating a fake reality for them.
Exactly. So when you were sharing that story about AJ on that little wall, it took me to the same conversation you had with me, kind of stepping into that next phase, which as you were sharing that next phase, so much of my mindset, like that middle one, is just kind of that socialization, which you defined really deeper toward empathy, developing that empathy. Like there were several times, when we're hanging in the driveway or in the cul-de-sac in our neighborhood where we had our folding chairs, we're hanging out, and I was the first dad to get up, and you were conditioning me, like you put your hand on my leg and be like, dude, sit down. Like they're going to work it out. Like just watch, see. And like, by helicoptering like that, I was diminishing my kid's ability to allow for that environment through the socialization.
I wouldn't say you were helicoptering, and I'm going to expose you for a minute. And I think this is it because I love you and trust you. But you were in a phase that a lot of dads of boys, when they're first born, are boys, they love playing with their kids. And they become, there was a point where maybe you were too much of your kid's homie. So then when it was time to hang out with the adults and the kids were around, your kids were trained to try to include you in everything. So you and I are sitting over there just trying to relax, talk adult stuff, and the kids are playing. And your sons kept rolling up, hey, Dad, check this out, or Dad, throw me this, or Dad, catch. Which is cool. Like, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, but you have to teach them to be aware of the context of and so one thing my wife did, I didn't understand it, was when the kids were little, and I don't know if this was how it worked, but almost every day she required, once they were out of a certain age, she required them to play in their room by themselves for an hour and entertain yourself. Play with your Legos, play with your dollhouse. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but yeah.
No, that's good right there. Independent playtime. Like, like go spend some time with self. I just, I kind of wish I would have caught that, because in my mind, looking back, what I caught from it was let the socialization unfold and allow for your children to fit in that environment, as opposed to trying to control that environment to help your kid fit, when you're handicapping their ability to be able to do that within the environment, so to speak.
Right.
And
adapt.
And that's what adapt to what's happening. That's what I got out of that, because here's the truth, man. When you said that just now, I'm thinking, I don't think I've grown through that. Like, I'm still too much of my kids' homies. And I hate saying that in some ways, because I know as a parent, like, there's a lot of not good stuff with that. And it's hard to be honest and like look inward. Like, we went to my kids' basketball games last night, and I think I said bye to 30 basketball players and 3 parents.
Yeah.
I was high-fiving the dudes, talking to them about their games, and like,
well, I think that's just because you're like me, where like I don't tend to get along or with people my age, just because I like to play and have fun, and people my age in their 40s just kind of given up on having fun.
Yeah. So, okay. So that was one of my first thoughts, and even added to like the environment thing, like, it's crazy to see parents with 1 or 2 young children, because it just like takes me to a place of like, man, that's like vacation for me. Cause like, I have 4 kids, but to see them, like, when it's time to put their kid down, all the lights go off. You got to start talking at a whisper. We're going to put the little sound music thing on with the little LED soft glowing lights, and we're going to swaddle, and we're going to set the environment. And then, okay, we can't talk. Don't let that door shut. If the dog barks, we're kicking it in the throat. Like, I can relate to that with, my youngest, but then people help me see that, like, okay, no, put your kid in the middle of the living room, turn the vacuum on, let the music play. Like, it totally shaped the way my kids sleep anyways now. Like, my kids could sleep in the environment, so we don't have to, because sleep time is such a huge thing for parents.
Yeah, I think they called it like a sleep prop. So if you had all these triggers that your kid needed to go to sleep, it would be tough to break those. So then when you're traveling, or you're just across town at grandma's house, the kid won't sleep, because they're dependent on the very exact.
Right.
And that's details of parenting.
Yeah, sure,
but that really comes down to the same thing. The one paradigm that covers all that is they're coming into your world. Mm-hmm. Teach them how to exist in your world.
When you were sharing middle phase into that kind of that third phase, like, one of the things that I was thinking through with how I'm just doing what I'm doing, for right or for wrong, as a parent, just, in these crunch years, is, I put a lot of emphasis in, and I'm filtering it with what you were saying with empathy, around like that. You were talking about the needs, and I think it's similar to like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And and for whatever reason, I've kind of adopted to or latched onto, and I'm not claiming to be right or any kind of expert, but what I've observed is like this need for self-actualization, where I feel like it's just almost just dangerous for kids in the way that we parent, but also within those environments where like kids get punished for being who they are, so to speak.
Right.
And then you begin to lose yourself to fit in a way where it's safe, and you're neglecting these things that are the very, fiber of who you are, where then you collect these hurts. And then you get to the other side of it by the time you're a teenager. Really, I feel like I see it more in young adulthood, where it's almost like a reset button of self to do this work of healing and reconciliation and forgiveness, whether it's parents, siblings, to that next layer, extended family, to that next layer of friends, to that next layer of acquaintances, but really within this environment of public schooling, where it is what it is. But in that, it's almost like there's these like prison type rules, so to speak, where you gotta operate and behave a certain way to be safe, where you're not being put front and center, where who you are is being made a target for, bullying or, people's expense, then it's like you're scared to be yourself. And these environments trigger these things to keep you from being yourself. And so like when I think of my kids as a parent, everything you said, yes. Like as you were talking, I'm like, that's really good. That's really good. That as a parent, I want my kids to be who they are and give of themselves and dial in on these passions. And as opposed to just kind of going through our culture where you get to the point of, man, what is it? What is my life? Like, what is this for? What's this worth? Like, will I ever be happy? Because you're so far removed from your true self that you're lacking this self-actualization of, no, I am who I am. I'm proud of who I am. Like my greatest gift is me to those around me. And really that's going to unfold like my purposes and maybe my career or how I can be happy. And so that to me was what was going through my mind as you were sharing these things. And I can see how if you're not liked, if you're already behind the 8 ball, how much more work that creates and how much more separated you are from yourself. And those labels go with you and you believe them, you adopt to them, those integrate into who you are. And it's so hard that I think that, at the very beginning of this conversation, you're talking about our need for therapy and our need to work through these things. And I think that that's a huge part of our life is the work that's before us that we need to individually be doing, however that looks. And I think at the beginning of the year, that's how we do these, resolutions is we realize I got to work on myself, and so anyways, those were a couple of the things that were just like totally going through my mind as you were sharing and where I'm at with my kids.
No, you're at the exciting time because you start to really recognize where you it seems you did well and where you may have gotten behind a little bit. Is your kid making good decisions and do they have confidence in themselves in the right context? So again, that really comes down to that first thing. Teach them to live in the world as it actually is. And that's a big part of it. And that comes down to, there's going to be context in which you're in your space. It's your time. It's your bag, whether that's sports, whether that's social environments, whether, arts. Like that's why I think it's important during that second phase is to figure out what your kid is good at and water that and help it grow, because that is going to be their center of self-confidence. I'm good at something, and that's important, or I'm passionate about something that I want to be good at. That gives them an anchor and identity, so try all sorts of things out. Make sure you expose your kids, sports, arts, social contexts, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I hope that helps for all the soon to be moms and dads out there. I love talking about it because again, it was my passion. It's kind of how I started my career.
Heck yeah, dude.
All right. Topic du jour. All right. We one of our predictions for 2025, John, if you recall from the prediction show we closed out 2024 with, is we're predicting a guitar album or song. And I had said, I think the last like guitar riff that the kids were stoked on and learning to play on guitars was Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes. Ding, bam, 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 bam. Now it's like canon at a sporting event, right? It's always there.
Yeah.
So I think we're due. No, I don't think the guitar is going to take over.
You pointed out a long time ago, hockey is the best arena music of all the sports.
It really is. And what's funny is, where was I? We were at a game. Oh, we were in Spokane at Gonzaga watching a basketball game, which is, it's kind of out there in the country. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there with my wife and I'm like, we have to count how many AC/DC songs they play. at most college arenas for basketball, AC/DC is maybe one every once in a while. And it's almost always just Thunderstruck in the event the game goes into overtime. Like that's it. Where hockey, it's metal, dude, AC/DC all day. They play Pennywise Bro Hymn at the Cedar Park at the minor league hockey team there in Austin. And one of my favorite songs. Yeah. So hockey music is, you're right. It slays. It's the guitar music. It's all the hard rocking stuff.
Yeah, I had to throw that in there. Yeah.
No, that's good. That's a good point. But yeah, no, I think we're due for a guitar sound. But again, I don't think the guitar is ever going to have, it's its moments like it's had throughout, early rock days, 80s glam rock, and then kind of your hardcore riff stuff in your metal and stuff in the 80s and 90s. So guitar album draft. All right. So here's my kind of how I'm framing it, because I'm not going, by like, I guess if you probably went to like Rolling Stone magazine or Billboard, they're going to have like a top guitar albums of all time. And what's going to be on there is probably some of the things that I would pick, but also you're going to have a lot of like Yngwie Malmsteen,
Sure.
Steve Vai,
Joe Satriani, Eric Johnson.
Yes. Yeah. Which is like cool, like guitar, and that's just about guitar virtuosity, which is not,
can appreciate it.
Yeah. I probably listen to just a very few music bands in any genre that is virtuoso, where that's the centerpiece, the musicianship, and the song comes second. I like songs. I like albums. I want a song with dynamics and arc and story and emotion. And so that's one part of it. Like, it's got to be a good song, right? The guitar work has to stand out. And so part of that is the density of guitar in the album. So album as a whole. And the other one is, the impact on me. It's most of the albums I'll probably draft are going to be stuff that was released or was popular during my lifetime, and probably during, when I was really into guitar. Plus a few others that I'll probably pepper in there to mine. So that's it. Impact on me is a good song. I'm not looking for guitar wanking,
Mine's selfish. So I'll be picking ones that just really impacted me and influenced me.
Nice. And I think the other component is did I learn to play guitar, or did I learn lots of
These
songs
riffs.
on that album? So let's go. As always, I like to give John the first pick in the draft. So for your first pick, what are you thinking?
I'm going with my first pick, where it was, I would say, the first guitar album that just I wanted to listen to over and over again. And it might be a little bit off from the top people would assume, but it's up there. I'm going to go with Nirvana's Nevermind. Smells Like Teen Spirit. When that came out, it was at this age that it was just this new movement of grunge. And I wore that CD out and I listened to it, and those power chords and the grunge overdrive and turning up the gain. That was a very influential album in my life.
Yeah, no, it kind of, it really, the context of which that album came out is what's so important about it, because guitar rock was so like, this was the end of days for the glam, right?
Yeah.
Poison, Motley Crue, those bands, Warrant, the glam rock with the tights and the makeup and the show. And you kind of had a little bit of transition. I always consider like Skid Row and Guns N' Roses kind of the transition from glam. They're not fully glam.
Right.
They're a little sloppier, a little more, I would say harder than the glam music. Not, and then Nirvana came in. It just said, I'm just wearing jeans and a flannel and I'm playing power chords, and it's got a sloppiness to it, but a soul. I totally agree. And that was on my list of songs, of albums that I would have picked. Nirvana, Nevermind, good pick. Well, in a similar vein, I'm going to go, and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to pull this one off. I'm going with, for my number one pick in the guitar album draft, I'm going with Rage Against the Machine's 1992 self-titled album, Rage Against the Machine. Top to bottom, this was legitimately, like, I had a guitar prior to this. I think I had like I had a Fender Strat, like a made in Mexico Fender Strat. And, I was just I learned a few Metallica riffs and those sorts of things. And then when this album came out, it was, this is it. This is how I'm going to learn how to play. I bought the book, so you had to buy the sheet music and learned it top to bottom as best I could, because I was kind of poor and I couldn't afford any effects. Right. So I didn't have the whammy pedal and the delay pedal. That contrary to what most people think, Tom Morello doesn't have a deep pedal board. He's got like 3 pedals. He's got a boost, a delay, and a whammy. And that's about it. Maybe a chorus pedal in there, maybe a flanger, but real simple. And so I learned that album, and that's how I learned how to play guitar. And I always loved it because it was very, I loved hip hop at the time too. So it covered everything for me. It's just like the perfect album, perfect timing. Rage Against the Machine, self-titled album, 1992. That's my number one pick.
Heck yeah. That's awesome. Golly, that's a good one. That's on my list. That's way high up there. Okay. So for me, next one, I would say the metal that made way for me as a kid that landed. So metal for me, I was young. And so some of it was hard, like to digest, and some of it was scary.
Right.
But, I'm going to go Master of Puppets, Metallica.
Oh,
Just the solos and the, man, they're just classic, and just those were solos that went and went and went for so long that I love to listen to. And
how many of those songs have two solos?
Right.
Like solo 1, solo 2, in the bridge. I remember the moment I first heard this album. I'm just coming into like serious skateboarding. I'm maybe 11 or 12, and I'm at like the house where the cool skateboarders are, and there's like a dozen of us, and we're about to go skating. We all just kind of met up there. I don't even know how we did it back then. We didn't have phone. Like, we're just at dude's house hanging out. Parents aren't home. And as people are showing up, someone puts that album on and cranks it on, the stereo, and just that scoop mid guitar. It was just so different from what was out in the, from the Bon Jovis and everything that was happening at the time that you heard. And I'm like, it changed me. Awesome album. Definitely was on my short list of stuff to pick. So that creates a number 2 pick for me. I'm going to go, this is going to be out of the blue. And I think this is, and I bet you it's not even on your list, not on a lot of people's list. This is a sleeper guitar album. And I know we talked at the top, like I'm not looking for stuff that's, virtuosity, but this album kind of has that. And the guitar work on it is almost more about the space in between the notes, one of those, but they serve the song so well. And that is John Mayer's Continuum.
Oh, look. Right.
That was your next one?
Right there.
Got it. Like, if you didn't realize this was a guitar album, you need to go listen to it now. This is I prior to this album, I said I didn't even like John Mayer. Like, his stuff before that, it was just pop music. Mm-hmm. But I don't know who talked to him, who got in his ear, or maybe it was always there and someone talked him into it and made him do the wrong thing before this album. But it seems like he said, you know what, I'm going to find the best drummers, bass players, guitar players I know, and put them in the studio and just let them dominate. And John Mayer's a good guitar player in his own right. And the guitar work on this album is just, it's beautiful. It's every note serves the song every time. So it's always on rotation on a road trip for me. I like to listen to albums top to bottom to pass the time when I'm driving. John Mayer, Continuum. That's my number 2 pick.
He is arguably one of the best or top 3 best guitarists of our generation. And he is so good at guitar.
Yeah.
And his vocals are good. His songwriting's great, but man, his guitar playing is unreal. And just his roots to blues and his ability to just play that lead, make it wail and slow it down. And yeah, that was on my list. I had to give a nod to him with high, regard, because when it comes to guitar and then the albums I listened to, that was a very listened album and singer that is so much guitar, man.
Right.
It's so good. So good.
Great album.
I'm gonna throw a little bit of a curveball in there, and again, this is selfish, but I'm thinking about years of listening to music, and some of the music that the music that I listened to in high school in that time frame. It was late '90s, but this album influenced so much of the music that I listened to, and I even have had a chance to see them in concert, and it's such a unique experience. but I'm gonna go with my next pick, Tool's Lateralus album.
Ooh.
I know there's a certain stigma that comes with the Tool listeners out there, but there is a flavor that they brought that was new to the table that they then helped make way for other artists, but nobody could quite do it like they could, and they reached a different part of you when you listen to them. That just it was intriguing, it was creepy, it was powerful. It related to just some deep hurt and just the anger and the angst and getting that out. And yeah, so but the way they did that and the way that they tuned up those guitars and put their effects on those, pretty dang awesome, pretty heavy.
It has that virtuoso vibe to it, that prog rock kind of thing. They took what, you know, I make fun of fans of Rush and Dream Theater all the time, because I think Rush and Dream Theater both fit an axiom I have for life, which is anything that only dudes like will never be cool. Which, well, but may not be true. But Tool kind of took that and made it popular. Like they took that kind of progressive, you know, nerd music and made it good for people who weren't nerds. And so, yeah, I'm not mad about it at all. Like, I think that's a great pick. You know, I considered Tool, but in all fairness, I've never really put a lot of Tool on. I like some of the singles, and I think part of it was I worked in a surf shop during, you know, as I was wrapping up college, like in 2000. And one of the Tool albums, whatever Tool album was that year, was on rotation so hard, like 12 times a day I would hear a Tool song. It would have been that album. Yeah, Lateralus. Like, so I heard enough Tool in the summer I was working at a surf shop before I finished college that I was after college. So yeah, but really good. And maybe I need to go back and listen to some Tool. Appreciate what Maynard James Keenan did. That's the second time he's made our list. Does a guest vocal on that Rage album.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got no patience.
Yep.
No. That's him.
And that was kind of before he made it.
He screamed that last. Yeah. I forgot.
Go find a video of him doing it live at some festival. He's there, and it's kind of, you know, he hadn't blown up yet, and he's, you know, doing it live with Rage. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you sent that to me.
I did send it. Yeah.
Dude, I didn't even put that two and two together when you sent that to me.
Yeah.
I was like, he did that so well. Well, yeah, because it was him.
Sounds just like him.
Nailed it.
Oh
gosh.
So I'm gonna kind of take one out of similar to the first one, which was an album like we talked earlier with G Love. This is an album where I remember distinctly the first time I heard a song off this album. Back when you had radio stations that took chances on things, especially if you lived near a big city. At the time, I was not too far from San Francisco, so I would pick up a San Francisco radio station. And the first time I heard the Sweater song, Undone, from Weezer, it was a sonic shock. If you weren't around at the time, you might not have realized how different that was. I can't remember the year. Was that maybe 94, 95? But the first time I heard it was so different, you know, because everything we were listening to at the time was a lot more electric guitar, harder stuff. Then you had this little acoustic riff that was really cool. So I'm going to pick, for my next pick, number 3 of the guitar album draft, I'm taking the Blue Album from Weezer.
Sweet. Also a band I got a chance to see, and just one of my favorite bands, man. So good.
I've not seen them. They came through Portland a few months ago, and they just did a tour where they played the Blue Album front to back. It was the whole point of the tour. I think they probably played some stuff before and after, but the core of the show was we're doing Blue Album front to back. They've never seemed to recreate the popularity of that, obviously, because it's a niche sound. You're not going to.
They've been pretty dang successful.
They've been journeymen, just crushing it. I think the better album, although less of a guitar album, is the one after that, Pinkerton. That's probably my favorite Weezer album, which is weird to say, but for guitar, just the impact they came, but they kind of cleaned up what was happening in grunge and brought in some acoustic, but also still, you know, if you listen to their interviews, they're big fan. They probably at the time were listening to more like real metal, Slayer.
Mm-hmm,
So the
mm-hmm,
guitar tone they were giving was very metal, even though the riffs were not metal. So
mm-hmm,
love
mm-hmm.
that album.
Yeah, buddy. Awesome one. Golly, so good. Okay, so my pick I might get docked points a little bit.
That's okay. If it's
but
country, go
but
for it.
but here's the deal. Well, no, I'm not going that route. I think I'm going the route your way. And I think on your list you're like, what? But this band kicked the door open for me to step into the world of punk more, because I was behind with punk when it was early. It was hard for me to dig into just the culture I grew up in. But this one, this album, alongside a friend of mine who,
Yeah,
not in the same,
to that point, if I can jump in, the way most people get into punk, they get into a culture where punk is part of it first. At least that's how it was, where you don't punk and then you can engage in the culture.
I missed both, really.
Yeah.
But this one got me into it alongside a friend of mine who was in a ska band. But I have to say, an influential album in my world at the time, arguably the most listened to album, maybe my 8th grade year, was Green Day's Dookie.
Nice.
Because of the punk riffs, the pop, more pop punk, probably. That's why I'm saying docked points. It's like, I don't even know if you would consider them punk. But
I think so. I don't hate on punk bands that make it big. They started as a punk band. They were a punk band, and especially from the West Coast, that sound, punk was a little more. It's easier to sing along with West Coast punk than East Coast punk, and when you get into like, Dead Kennedys,
for sure,
going
they're
back to the Ramones, it's more hardcore.
Their vocals are just like very different.
Yeah, so it's punk, and
yeah,
it's some punks think it's punk to hate on punk bands that make it, which is like, who cares? Like, that's a great album.
But the album from beginning to end, that was an all listen album for me. Like, that year it came out, it was a top album. Like, everybody was listening to it. It was the album when it came out, in the world I was in. That was such an influential album for me, and just the whole album's good.
That's awesome. No, I dig it. We all learned how to play, When I Come Around, like that. Like, that album's so important. It really is a milestone in the music history, where it introduced punk to people who had never really heard it or given it a chance.
I fell in love with it.
So people that hate on it, for me, it's like, we made it. Punk made it, so I celebrate it. And, you probably, on the heels of that, how many kids in your school started to dye their hair funny colors?
Faux hawks were a thing.
All right. My number 4 pick in the guitar album draft from 1991. It was such a different guitar sound that you were forced to listen to it, and a virtuoso in his own mind, but very palatable. And again, what's important to me with guitar work, it has to serve the song. Is it helping the song, or is it, like a Santana solo that totally goes off the rails and solos over the vocal and just takes over the song. You forget the song is happening.
Yeah.
And that is Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
Oh man,
Chili
that's
Peppers.
on my list.
Yeah. The Chili Peppers have gone through many guitar players. Hillel was who they started off with. And John Frusciante is who they brought in, and their first big album, working with Rick Rubin, got Blood Sugar Sex Magic going. And really he is the difference. Like, I basically don't listen to Chili Peppers albums that a different guitar player is on, because it doesn't even sound like the Chili Peppers. So Blood Sugar Sex Magic and By the Way is probably my favorite Chili Peppers album, but Blood Sugar Sex Magic is, the world was introduced to John Frusciante as a guitar player, and he changed. He just was not, I bet he doesn't even know the notes he's playing. He just is He's one with his
Yeah.
guitar, and in combination with Flea's bass and Chad Smith's
Golly,
drums.
so
That is
good.
the one of the best backing bands in rock history. Those
I
three.
agree.
So,
They totally carried Anthony Kiedis. I like him, and he's unique, and he makes the band. But his singing has always been a little questionable, like in live particularly. But like they carry the band, and I love Anthony Kiedis. He's a front guy, and you can't think of
I think
Red
he
Hot
knows
Chili
that.
Peppers
I think
without
he
him.
knows he's a terrible singer, and so he leans on the band. And that's really a good band is a band that is in flow together, and that's just like, hey, we're going to be in flow. And that, if you go see a band live that you've never seen before, right? And maybe it's a hired band to back up a really good singer. Boring, right? Boring.
Right.
But you go and you see a band you've never heard of, they play songs you've never heard, and you can immediately tell that they are locked in together and they are in flow and they love what they're doing.
And they're all
because I don't even
matching,
care what the genre is. You're going to love
right.
it. It's going to
They're
be
all
a
wearing,
good time.
Matching tube socks.
Yeah.
That'll always work.
I always tell people, if you ever have a chance, go see Bruce Hornsby, because that's what he does. Like, you don't like his music. It's kind of adult contemporary, on paper it sounds boring, but when you go see him live, you're going to see a team on stage. It is just phenomenal. So yeah, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. That's my number 4 pick.
Sweet. I got to go back to like getting real on the all-time lists here, because I loved it as a kid, and then it got me into their music, which I actually, the later albums, the Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 got me into, but Appetite for Destruction is on my list of, you got to give Slash his due, and I wouldn't say he's the greatest guitar of all time by any means, but I will say that his style. And what did he play? A Gibson SG? Is that what he played?
He plays
Les Paul.
He plays Les Paul. A lot of people don't know.
Les Paul.
Nearly all the Les Pauls Slash plays are not. I used to work in the guitar industry. Are not made by Gibson. He has someone else make them because the fretboard material Gibson doesn't offer. He plays an ebony fretboard on most of guitars, and you can't get an ebony fretboard on a Les Paul. So he has a ghost builder build it.
And there's no mistaking his style, his sound, and so good, man. I just, a lot of jumping on couches as a kid, a lot of listening to their albums and that album, on the way to sporting events, and just Welcome to the Jungle, man. That gets you pumped up,
right?
And again, I think I listened to Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 more because of when it came out. It was such a big deal when it came out. Those two albums, which the red and yellow one, as opposed to the purple one, I listened to that red one more. But Appetite for Destruction, without that, it makes me wonder how much of my childhood would be affected.
I have Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 on my list. I don't think it's going to make the top 10 for me, but it's in my short list and maybe an honorable mention because it has a few of what I think are the best guitar solos. They're top 20, maybe top 10 guitar solos. When you think of Don't Cry and November Rain specifically, those guitar solos, and that's the core of Slash's style. Like, that's why I said earlier, I think they were kind of a transition between the glam and the grunge, because he wasn't as polished as a Van Halen or some of those. It was a little bit sloppy and it felt more real. And so, funny enough, Slash released an album 2 weeks ago.
No way.
Someone mentioned it to me and had me check it out. It's kind of a blues album.
Interesting.
But it's just, I think these are, I don't know blues music, but I'm pretty sure these are all covers or nearly all cover songs. And so it's Slash on guitar, and then he's bringing in a guest on vocals, like Beth Hart, from Heart is in there. Chris Stapleton, Chris Robinson, Gary Clark Jr. maybe doing some guitar work there.
Dang.
Dorothy, Iggy Pop. So I haven't listened to. I listened to a couple tracks. It's on my. I keep a playlist in Spotify called Recommended, and whenever someone says, "Hey, you should listen to it," I have a place to stuff it, and then I'll go when I need to listen to something. I'll go there and look. And Slash has an album out, and it's just, if you like that kind of that just raw, marginally sloppy, which is endearing. I love his guitar work. It's a great album, Appetite for Destruction. I love it. Let's see. God, I'm trying to hear where I'm at number 5. So this one's really got to be kind of all time to make my top 5.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go with OK Computer.
Okay.
And part of that because I think this is the best album of all time. So let's just say that the best album of all time. But the guitar work is different. It took kind of what was happening. I think when I look at the 90s, when I say, if someone ever asked me if you had one song to pick to define the 90s alternative kind of rock sound, I would probably say Mayonnaise by Smashing Pumpkins. But it kind of takes what Smashing Pumpkins did. I wonder if the Greenwood was kind of informed by Smashing Pumpkins. The noodling, it's almost kind of like old Pink Floyd, where there's some nerdy, spacey sounds, but the guitar work is it still has good riffs. It's not just noise, and it serves the song. It's just complete. And but yet it's not guitar centric. So I think it often gets cast away as something that's not a guitar album, but it really is a guitar album. And maybe their last, where they got a little bit more, although In Rainbows has great riffs, there's a lot more going on, where this was kind of Radiohead's last like guitar led album as the main instrument. And
True.
flip and love it. Can't ignore OK Computer. That's my number 5 pick.
Heck yeah, dude. That's on my list. You took it.
It was kind of a defensive pick. Yeah.
That's good. That was well played. Okay, so I'm going virtuoso style. Dude who changed the game. Even though there's a lot of synth and a lot of just loop styles in it, you can't get away from the metal that exists in it and the unique sound that only he could bring. And so I'm gonna go 9 Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine.
Ooh. Yeah.
I mean, that industrial metal, raw, kind of like that evil edge to it that just, man, feels like the Terminators are taking over in a post-apocalyptic destroyed world. That to me, like hearing that, I'd never heard anything like it. And music that had guitars in it. I played lacrosse in high school, so I listened to a lot of metal to kind of stay pumped up. There's a lot of testosterone in that sport. 9 Inch Nails was getting a lot of playtime in this phase of my life. And I don't know if there's anybody who has really come alongside that's really taken that style and matched it. It's just so unique.
No, it is the defining album for industrial. I would say it everything starts and ends with Pretty Hate Machine. So seminal, like it is the work that defined what I consider to be industrial. And so yeah, I would say yeah, that's probably, and I think there'd be some disagreement there. I think the super industrial nerd fans would probably say like a Skinny Puppy or KMFDM from like the mid 80s would be the ring one that set it off. And that may be true, but for the rest of us, Pretty Hate Machine is where industrial music starts. And for a lot of people, that's where it ends too. I loved I've enjoyed, the 9 Inch Nails progression, and a few albums ago, which one was it? The copy of, let's see that recent album. I don't know if they've done a lot. Ghosts. Was it the Ghosts one? Maybe it was. Yeah. With the copy of, yeah, they put out some stuff that I really like. So I liked where Trent Reznor went there for a minute. With it, is it 2018?
There's when I hear that Trent Reznor has a hand in something, I want to hear it.
Yeah,
because it's going to be, it intrigues me. Like, okay, what am I going to hear now? Like, where is this going to go? How is this going to impact me? Because so many times I've heard his music, it just grabs me right away, and it's like, dang, that's wild. Like he brought it again. You know?
It's 2013's Hesitation Marks. good album to go back and revisit because it really kind of encapsulates all their sound. It has the guitar, it has the electronic, but yeah, Trent Reznor, he's one of those guys. Yeah, you're right. If his name's on it, I'm checking it out. And he's done a lot of movie scores in recent years. Mm-hmm. So great pick. Seminal album. Can't be mad about it. I'm going to go with one that's a little bit out of the blue. Now I'm going to save that because I need to be a little bit defensive because I know there's probably a couple here that are going to be on your list. And someone's going to, I'm surprised this one is still here.
Okay.
Probably because you already have one of theirs on yours, but I think I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go with for my 6th pick in the guitar album draft. I'm gonna go with Metallica's Black Album.
Yeah.
It again. This was I was already into Metallica, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All, Ride the Lightning. All that, having first interacted with Metallica off Master of Puppets. And in 1991, I would say it's definitely a departure from the speed metal that they were doing before. All of their stuff was
for
fast.
Sure.
There's only a few fast
true
tracks.
Metallica fans got so upset about this album. And arguably my favorite album, second to Master of Puppets. But yes.
It brought metal to the masses, similar to like Dookie for punk. Most people had never heard Metallica, never listened to Metallica, wouldn't touch Metallica. I don't think very few radio stations, even the hardest rock ones, played much Metallica. The speed metal wasn't radio friendly. It wasn't for the masses. And so the Black Album, and I don't know if it was intentional, production, label, I don't know who had them slow it down and throw a couple ballads in there. But it worked. Call them sellouts, and Hetfield always joked, we sell out every night,
I think Guitar Center probably really appreciated that album. I wonder how many people bought guitars because of that album.
You're not wrong. I mean, I think a lot of people wanted to play guitar off this album because the guitar was badass. And really, if you see some of the interviews, they almost I joke kind of like Bill and Ted. Remember, they went back in time so they could learn how to play guitar. Like in between this album and what I think would have been Injustice, they went and really just learned how to got mentors and got better at their instruments and came back and did this. And so Metallica's Black Album, that is my number 6 pick.
Awesome pick, man. I battled between that album and Master of Puppets. I think I defaulted to Master of Puppets for the sake of the guitar playing. Yeah. Not to say that Black isn't, but I will say I went and bought the tablature from the Camelot Music for the Black Album and learned some of the chords to some of those songs. One of my buddy learned the leads and we would get together and play together. I think I've played more guitar alongside somebody with that album than most any other, playing rhythm on that while my buddy played lead.
Nice.
And I saw Metallica twice in concert. And so because of that pick and because I saw Metallica in concert, I'm going to go with a band that I saw open for Metallica that had almost equal playing time on my radio during that Black Album just shortly after. But I'm going to go Alice in Chains' Dirt for my pick, which their Unplugged album was fantastic. But seeing them play live and just had a lot of influence in my life, and that album got played so much. So going that route, heavy guitar, grungy vocals, but going with that album.
No, I think they, when you look at the movement there in Seattle, the grunge, the core bands, Nirvana, obviously Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. Like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains were probably had the closest or the most overlap with the glam that preceded them. So your guitar riffs were a little more, at least in the early days, but they moved away from it really quick. And I love Jerry Cantrell's sound and everything he's doing. I love his stuff. So great album. And I think one of the more underrated, probably of the 4 or 5 bands that most people have heard of, not to take away from like Sonic Youth, Mudhoney, Melvins, things like that were happening up in Seattle too. Probably a little lower on the list from the Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, but I think they deserve a lot more credit. Great album. Flipping love it.
I mean, I wanted to put Pearl Jam somewhere in here, but I can't. Like the leads and stuff, like the guitar didn't quite influence me as much as like the melodies, the lyrics.
I think that's what
sound.
it came down to. Is I thought about Pearl Jam as well, and I don't think they're going to make the draft from me just for the same reason. Like they're really good songs and really good guitar playing. But the guitar is never like
Eddie Vedder's the guy.
For me, it never, it's not the most memorable part of the music. Or it's not. It doesn't. It blends in too well. Where it's not
Eddie Vedder's the Pearl Jam.
I didn't want to learn a lot of Pearl Jam songs. I just never did.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go for my, and this is kind of a bounce off of Radiohead. For my number 7 pick in the guitar album draft, I'm going to go with Siamese Dream.
Nice. Really good.
By Smashing Pumpkins.
That's really good.
It is. I have a Billy Corgan story. I was in Austin. I was riding my bike. I was at Mellow Johnny's there at 4th and Nueces, by the Austin Music Hall during South by Southwest.
Oh, dang.
The music part of South by Southwest. And, as I pull out onto 4th Street heading towards the music hall, Billy Corgan's walking down the street by himself. And I didn't realize, I knew he was tall, but I didn't realize dude is tall. He's like as tall as me. He's 6'5", 6'6".
Wow.
Maybe 6'7".
Dang. I didn't know that.
I was just by myself and I just rolled and I just said, "Hey, Billy," and waved and he waved and it was pretty cool. But like, this is a dynamic guitar album. Like, I think everyone should go back and listen to it again. I haven't seen him live, but you probably didn't learn to play much Smashing Pumpkins because one, he plays so many weird tunings, right? When he's playing live, I think he's switching guitars every other song because he has some really weird tuning to get the sound he's after. And so I think that's what's really unique about it. It's a defining album for me for 90s guitar. Like this is the 90s guitar alt sound. This is it. Everything kind of is based off of this. It's either more towards the Nirvana spectrum, which is power chords, or it's more towards the Radiohead where it's riffy. This is right in the sweet spot. So you have really good chords, some effects and some noodly stuff and hard stuff, slow stuff, just epics. Just a really good guitar album. I love Siamese Dream. That's my 7th pick.
Heck yeah. Sweet dude. That's great. Album that is not mainstream, that maybe many people haven't heard of, but the ones that like them are just die hard for them. And I feel like it's kind of Austin-y in some ways, but maybe it's bigger than that. But I've seen this band in concert and I played this album a whole lot, but I'm going to go with Toadies Rubberneck album, 94. I can sing along with it, but guitar carries the songs, and I loved them, and they put on a great show.
Great album. The biggest hit off that, everyone knows, Possum Kingdom, which is a lake in Texas, right? There's a lake called Possum, so it's actually.
And there's a lot of good songs on that album. It's kind of one of those like whole play albums too. But yes, that's the biggest song. That's the hit off of it.
Just again, a defining album for pop, for alternative music, kind of going off the grunge and just, that kind of music. This is still around. Here's the thing. This kind of music still is going very strong. It's just not popular.
Right,
so
right.
The guitar music is out there. Maybe we need to explore it on some episode, but
maybe
it's
not
out there.
Screaming, solos on this album, but the guitar is very front and center though.
Yeah, no, just good chords, interesting melodies like that. I think I would say that's probably what they were best at, is creating almost like Chris Cornell style melodies where it's like, how did a human think of that melody? I'll love it. I'll give you that. Rubberneck. Good one. Okay, I think I'm going to go with, for my 8th pick, eighth pick. I am going to go Vulgar Display of Power by Pantera.
Heck yeah.
This is
man.
mostly because of the sonic, right? Dimebag Darrell had such a unique tone to his guitar that nobody has ever really had this sound. He basically took that root fifth power chord, scooped mid, a lot of distortion, and kind of took it to a whole nother level. So when you think of like Walk and those like just violent power chords, and it had such an impact, and it was one of those ones where you almost couldn't learn to make it because the tone, you could never achieve the tone he had. So to this day, I've tried like just the there's a combination of compression, gating, scooping mids, a delay that's gated, and just to make a sound that is so unique yet super listenable, and just you immediately know that's amazing, but not so out there where you're like, I don't know, I don't understand. Like that album really brought a type of music, a metal to the scene that we haven't heard since. I think people tried to recreate that, but just awesome album, incredible guitar, so different.
Heck yeah. Well, even with different sounds, and I know you mentioned this earlier, but I'm going Audioslave album. Just the mix of Chris Cornell and members of Rage Against the Machine.
So you're going the first album, the self-titled joint.
Yeah, self-titled.
I'll give you that. Yeah, no, that's that. Yeah, I mean, if you were trying to create incredible music at the time, and you said, well, give me the best rock, backing band and the best vocalist in 2002, you wouldn't have to look too far before you'd be picking Rage Against the Machine and Chris Cornell. Love that album. Because Tom Morello, like I said, I learned how to play guitar on Tom Morello, and so it's fantastic. And then you have those Cornellian melodies like that only he can think of. Freaking great pick. I almost kind of just blend the three albums together. I don't tend to differentiate when I listen to it.
Yeah,
but I would say
there's songs on all of them.
If I had to pick one album, that one probably has more tracks where I'm like, those are sort of like, if I'm looking through Spotify right now and I could see which ones I've downloaded and that album, I have 4 downloaded. And when I look at the other albums, like if I go to Out of Exile, 1, if I go to Revelations, that was our other one, which I like a lot, 2 songs downloaded. So yeah, definitely probably my favorite, but I'll take Tom Morello all day. For my 9th pick, I'm torn here because I could pick all 3 albums. I have 2 picks left, 9 and 10, but I have to pick one. I have to pick something that David Gilmour did. Because
I figured as much. I knew this. I'm surprised this wasn't higher for you, just because of knowing you.
I honestly, I've saved them because I don't think I had to be defensive on it, because I know you and I know you're not listening to the Pink Floyd to the level I am, where the first tape I ever owned in my Walkman was an inherited tape from my brother, The Wall. So probably my favorite Pink Floyd album, The Wall. And so that is going to be my number 9 pick in the guitar album pick.
Heck yeah.
A draft is Pink Floyd, The Wall for number 9.
Sweet.
And I have to defend this sometimes with Pink Floyd enthusiasts because, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals are usually higher on most people's lists because they are probably better albums, like front to back. They're also shorter. This back when I moved to CD, this was 2 CDs, bro. Like it was one of those. Like The Wall's big daddy.
Yeah.
But this has the best David Gilmour solos. You have 4 or 5 tracks on here where it is not just the best David Gilmour solos. And again, I wasn't leaning towards virtuosity with my picks. So just how good the solos were is not a huge factor, but it's worth saying. Not only are they the best David Gilmour solos, in terms of serving the song and fitting into the music. The David Gilmour solos on The Wall, think Comfortably Numb.
Yeah,
They're the best solos of all time.
for sure.
They're so good that when David Gilmour plays them live, he plays them exactly to the album, because you can't, it's canon. It is perfection. And to go and freestyle that
Yeah,
is, and I think purists might be, that's lame. You should always kind of adapt. No, when you play the solo from Comfortably Numb, you play the album solo from Comfortably Numb. Both of them.
Sure.
There's two solos on there, and it just, you don't get it wrong. All right, John.
Yes, sir.
What is your 10th pick in the
10th
guitar
pick. Okay.
album draft?
I'm doing this because it's like, I think fantasy football, you got to get a player that you can count on to get you the points, that's going to win you the championship, proven track record, Hall of Fame. Have to put this on here because of legendary status, and it deserves the nod, but I'm going to go with Jimi Hendrix's Experience. Are You Experienced? Ooh. Now, I know that's predictable, and I know that that's kind of no-brainer. That is low-hanging fruit. But how many guitar players have been influenced and music due to this man?
I'll give you that. I think that's valid. My 10th pick is going to be similar. No, the Jimi Hendrix. So I've said this before, where I'm kind of at an age, my parents and my siblings are at an age where classic rock wasn't really being played in my house in my developmental years, before I was starting to listen to my own music, which informs your music, right? Because my parents were older. So they were listening to, when they were putting music on, it was 50s and before. The Platters, maybe some Patsy Cline, as some of the newer stuff. So when it came to the rock, my parents weren't listening to the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, So if you had younger boomer parents, your parents were much younger than mine, they probably had at least some adjacent to that, so you were exposed to it. So I kind of missed out on the classic rock, and I think the only exception is Pink Floyd, because I had a brother who was way into Pink Floyd, and so it was just, I was exposed to it at an early age. But the classic rock I missed out on, so I don't have much of a heart for classic rock, but I get it, and I respect it, and I think you're absolutely right. You can't ignore what Jimi Hendrix did for guitar music.
I can't imagine my music experience without him.
Yeah.
I mean, I was born into what his legacy was and what he left behind, and it is easy to listen to, because it's familiar, because he set the groundwork for so much of music and guitar players. Just what he did, and like the way you described, Red Hot Chili Peppers guitar player, sometimes I wonder, he was in a different dimension. I don't think he realized he was playing a guitar. He was just being one with it, and awesome.
Yeah, no, I think I think it's similar to a John Frusciante, where I wouldn't be surprised if Jimi Hendrix didn't really understand music theory and scales and just played right with his soul, just was one, and that's important. So yeah, no, I dig it. But yeah, I lived without classic rock, so Jimi Hendrix was not something I was exposed to. Cool. So my 10th pick, I'm going to go with one that I think it's virtuoso, but it's also good songs. And this was probably, so the first component, my dad bought a stereo system, and around the time this album came out. So this is probably, I want to say, to look it up here. There it is. Okay. So yeah, 1985. So right around that time, my dad bought a component system and the first CD player in the house. And my dad would have otherwise not listened to this music, but my guess is this is the music the guy at the electronics store played for my dad. Or it was in a kiosk by the register while he's buying the components. This is the one where you buy you have a receiver, everything plugs into, and it connects to the speakers. Then you plug in a record player, a tape deck, and a CD player to it, maybe an equalizer. So you had to buy all these parts. Buying a stereo was a big investment, but they were loud. It was, it was a banger. And this album came home with it. And so it was my first exposure to a CD, first CD I ever got to listen to. And that is Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms.
Oh, wow.
Which has incredible guitar music on it. I think one of the greatest clean guitar sounds of all time Mark Knopfler makes, which is funny. This is a story that a connection here. So first CD I ever listened to, first kind of modern music my dad probably ever listened to, because my dad is old at this time, but had this CD. And I would, when nobody was home later, I would like crank that thing and like vibrate the windows in the house listening to that album, because it was the only CD we had that I liked. Everything else was garbage to me as a kid. But Mark Knopfler, I ended up early out of college. One of my early jobs was managing the electronics department of a boutique guitar amplifier pickup, and effects maker by the name of John Suhr. John Suhr got his start working at a guitar shop, Pensa something, and he made Mark Knopfler's guitar. So Mark Knopfler, his guitar he plays was always called a Pensa Suhr that John Suhr played. And so later, in my first kind of tech or electronics management role, was managing the team that built the amps, the pickups and the effects for John Suhr.
Heck yeah.
And that's where he got his start. And so one of the amps we made was this clean amp that Mark Knopfler used to play, and it was famous. So every guy that wanted to play clean tones, this was the amp to buy.
That is so cool.
So pretty cool to come around full circle there. But yeah, that album, Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits, is, in the face of glam rock in 1985, they were kind of keeping it true. This is the closest thing to classic rock I was probably raised on, besides the Pink Floyd. So that's my 10th pick, Brothers in Arms, Dire Straits.
Awesome.
Okay, honorable mentions. Anything you want to throw out there that didn't make it?
I mean, one I had on my list, and I went between OK Computer and why am I drawing a blank on Radiohead's best album
Kid
of
A?
all time? Kid A.
The Bends.
Kid A and OK Computer. I had Kid A on there.
Yeah.
And it was just because some of the guitar riffs on that album. Let's see.
For many, that's their favorite Radiohead album.
I put Back in Black on there.
Can't be mad about Back in Black. Yeah.
White Stripes, I got to give a nod to the White Stripes, just because of, when you dig into Jack White's Montgomery Ward guitar that he played,
right?
Which department store guitar, and that is now like a collector's item. But there's a movie that came out that was a documentary, and it had Jack White in it. It had U2 in it, and one more famous guitarist. But they took a look at their guitar sounds, and it goes into their method and their process,
right?
And it just showed Jack White in the backyard with like some metal wires, and he assembled this makeshift electric guitar and started making it wail. So he's always made a guitar scream, and a lot of times it's
that
noisy.
Was that documentary, like where he was with like Jimmy Page.
Yes, the Edge from U2 was in it.
Yeah,
which he openly admitted he's not the greatest guitarist, but he will say he might be one of the greatest studio guitarists in the way that he utilized the studio to make so much of their sounds.
All right, my honorable mentions. I'm going to go, we talked about it, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, just because it's up there with some of David Gilmour's solos in terms of some of the greatest solos within a song ever, / I'm going to go with, you just mentioned him, I had it written down, and it was a candidate. It was almost like this is barely missed out, probably because I don't really care for most of their catalog, so I'm kind of down on them, and that's U2's Joshua Tree. Mm-hmm. What the Edge did, it's important. Like, I don't know if he's a good guitar player or not, if he's covering himself with effects, but you got to appreciate that guitar work. It's legendary. Those riffs and those tones are timeless, and they're so important to the history of rock. So I would pick the Joshua Tree as an honorable mention. And then lastly, I'm going to throw another Pink Floyd in there, and I'm going to say The Final Cut. It's an album. I consider this to be their last album, although, The Division Bell is technically a Pink Floyd album. But The Final Cut is on the heels of The Wall, which they toured with The Wall. There was a movie. I think that album broke the band. And The Final Cut, so they worked as a team. I would say they were really synced for Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, and Wish You Were Here. Like that was when they were clicking. The Wall was an experiment. I think they all signed up for, but I think it broke them because it was a little too structured, although we got some great work out of it. And I think Roger Waters tried to create The Wall with The Final Cut because you could tell Roger Waters wrote everything else. Even if I didn't look at the credits, you could tell he wrote everything and drove everything. He was trying to recreate The Wall. And so I feel like David Gilmour showed up and just played guitar. And so the guitar work on here goes kind of, because nobody really listened to the album, the guitar work is amazing because David Gilmour just showed up and just shredded. But David Gilmour shredding. So it does serve the songs.
Yeah.
But I love The Final Cut, and it has some really cool riffs. If you love guitar tone, and I love listening to really interesting guitar tone, it's a great album. So that's an honorable mention.
The nod I need to give, and it's not because I listened to all the albums and he didn't make my list because of that, but my favorite country guitarist is Brad Paisley. He's the John Mayer of country music, where he is an amazing guitar player.
I've worked with him. He's been in my amp shop working on amps. Like
Stratocaster guy,
talking through tone. He tends to buy a lot of amps, a lot of rare amps. So good stuff. Guitar album draft. So now I want to talk. I got a few minutes here. I want to just hit real quick on the homework. I don't have a specific homework assignment for you. For those just listening, I assign John the art, creative, cultural homework every week. So your homework this week is to pick a book for us to read, and it has to be one of the classics. It can't be The Old Man and the Sea. I just finished reading that, but anything else in that realm. You have to pick a classic, and we're both going to read it.
What if you've already read it?
It's okay. I had read Old Man and the Sea before.
Okay.
And that's why they're classics. They're rereadable, know? So, Of Mice and Men, The Catcher in the Rye. If you want to get in some Tolstoy, those are longer, but they're made,
right. I've got one in
The Unbearable Lightness of Being. Like you can read any of them, but go into that vein. Find a classic.
Okay.
Cool. I'd like to see if you can come up with one I haven't read. A lot of classics I haven't read.
I have a feeling you may have read this
but
one.
I want to make sure I stay in touch with the classics.
Okay.
That's your homework.
Great. Let's do it.
Season 2's kicked off. I'm excited. We'll get in some more stuff coming up. But thanks for listening, everybody.